Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Paranormal Axetivities with your host, Ben Axe. And that's right, I said Axetivities and not the other word. Sometimes my words kind of run together, so bear with me here. I had to take a speech class in like second grade. But yeah, I appreciate you all tuning in and giving this a shot. This is going to be a podcast hosted by me, primarily going over all things paranormal. Ghosts, spirits, demons, possibly, what anything that's out there in the paranormal world, it's going to be covered here. I originally thought I was going to say that, I'm into all things paranormal and I love it, but that's not necessarily true. I was pushed into this basically from past experiences and current experiences and that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying I'm a fan of the paranormal, but I am familiar with the paranormal, and if you're familiar with it, why not talk about it? So that's what I'm here to do with this show going forward, basically. And as long as the show keeps going, it might not necessarily be only paranormal. I could see me talking about some Bigfoot stuff or some alien stuff. I actually do have a UFO story. It's not mine, actually. It's my dad's, but he swears by it. So I will tell that story at some point down the road. But basically, this is just your intro episode. So I'm going to talk about me a little bit, some of my backstory and some of my history, and that's pretty much going to be it. The format of this show going forward is going to be either just me by myself solo talking about whatever I want to talk about that episode, and I will also be interviewing people as well. I already have 2 episodes recorded of my wife, who has a vast background in paranormal that has been going on from her childhood to this morning, actually. So we will have her on probably more than just those 2 times, but it's very interesting stuff and some pretty crazy stuff. And you guys might think I'm a little crazy, or she's a little crazy, or all a little crazy, but hey, you're listening, so you're probably a little crazy as well. You may know my name. I actually host another podcast with my wife called The Moose Point. It's not weekly, but it's still alive, believe it or not. Pretty fun podcast. We just talk about general stuff, nothing too specific. And I'm also part of another podcast called Regularly Scheduled Hostilities. So if you're a fan of pro wrestling, which is what that's about, check that out on Spotify and all your big platforms, basically. All your favorite platforms, as they say in the podcast world. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get this rolling. I am quarantined, as I'm sure many of you are, and I think I actually have it, so I might not sound the most energetic during this episode, but that's okay. I have every symptom other than the fever, so I cannot get tested. But I think today is the first day since I've started feeling symptoms that I feel the best. So I figured, why not go ahead and get this thing rolling so I can get everything else uploaded and get it started. This time to get something started is when you're doctor-ordered quarantined and there's no other distractions. So a little bit about me here is when I was a kid, I grew up in a house, actually, that my dad's dad built. So I guess my grandfather, grandpa, whatever you want to call him, built. And I don't say that with a much personal tone, I guess, as he died before I was born. So I don't really know him, so I don't feel connected with him, so that's why I say my father's or my dad's dad. But he built the house that I grew up in. I'm not sure all of the details. I'm not sure the years. I want to say 40s and or possibly 50s. But he built the house, and then my dad was born and grew up in that house. And then after he passed away, my dad kept the house, and me and my 2 sisters were raised in the house. And it's just on a little lot in St. Mary's, Ohio. Feel free to look that up. And I do live in Ohio, which is considered a very haunted state. And I'm inclined to agree from what I've seen, felt, and all that good stuff. So just, to get some stories out of the way, as that's what people want to hear, right? Ghost stories. So to get some of them out of the way, it was our rooms, I guess the house was wooded floor, or had wood floors in it. And we would always hear the creaks and the moans and all of that you hear in a house. My dad always said it's just the house settling. But there were multiple times where, every fucking night, actually, excuse my language, but every night I would hear, there's a hallway, like my bedroom, me and I'm the youngest, I have a middle sister, and then the oldest sister. When we were kids, me and the middle sister shared a bedroom. And so there's that room, and that room did not have a door, by the way. I'm not sure why, it just did not. But so it was that room, and then that room led into the living room, and then there was a hallway that led into another living room, and then into my sister's bedroom. That's just a little setup, I guess. And the hallway, that wooden hallway, or not the wooden, I call it the wooden hallway, but the hallway had a wooden floor, and every night, and even in the middle of the day, if we were quiet, we would just hear what sounded like walking up and down this hallway. I mean, clear as day, if you're walking on a wooden floor, you hear it, especially if you're wearing shoes, and that's what we heard all of the time. And because my room didn't have a door on it, I would always be afraid to look out that door because I knew there's going to be a ghost out there. And I was kind of a scared kid. I thought it was my imagination. My parents thought it was my imagination all the time. I never saw anything in that house. But then my sister, who will be on the show down the road, she's very interested in telling her stories. She swears on her life that it was my dad's mom, who I also did not meet, as she died early as well. And which makes sense, because if there's any ghosts in that house, it's probably going to be my family, as nobody has lived there at that point in time other than my family. So there's that. I mean, in that house, and just being in that house, there was that feeling of there's a ghost in here. And let's touch on that while I brought that up. One thing that you might not hear about on other ghost shows, or other, I'm not sure, I'll listen to one or two other ones. But when people tell ghost stories, they don't talk about the feeling they have, or if they live in a haunted house, I put in quotations, is there's just a feeling that you have in a haunted house, especially if you're in tune to that, if you're connected to that world, I guess. I'm not sure how they word that. I know there's multiple words that you can say to describe a person like that. Sensitive, I guess, is a big one. But if you're sensitive to that, if you're in a house, you have that feeling. And that house had that feeling. Even looking at that house, there's that feeling to it. That's just like, there's something here. And now, since I was born and raised in that house, I lived there until I was 15. I never knew otherwise. I thought that feeling was just a feeling that everybody has. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until I moved into our house, and my parents still live in the same town, but we just happened to move in May of 2003. We moved into, the new house. And that feeling was not in that house. When we moved in, I got everything settled, and my first night living there, I did not have that heavy weighing feeling. And I noticed it, but I still didn't think, well, that house was haunted and this house is not, and that's why. It's just it's something that I can look back on now and be like, oh yeah, that was definitely a different feeling. And it's crazy. And then one of my best friends, I believe his house, I think his parents still live there, was haunted as well. So I had that same heavy feeling in that house too, because I was there a lot, weekends and stuff like that. So it's just crazy how you just have that fucking feeling in your belly, and then it's just gone. And it's pretty wild. So we moved into that house in I think I said already, May 2003, so 2003. And nothing really happened during that time. I lived there from 2003 consecutively until September of 2008. I moved to Cincinnati for college and moved into a dorm room. And I was in college for 5 years or so, and then came back. And I moved back into that house that my parents still live at in June of 2012. So is that 5 years? Yeah, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, I do that kind of math on my fingers still. Do not judge me. But yeah, and then I moved back into that house in 2012, and that feeling that I had was back. That heavy feeling. And that being said, I still didn't really notice it at the time. Again, I'm looking back and now I know it. But I could just feel that heavy feeling. I didn't know why. It was just like, man, this just feels different than it did when I lived here before. I still visited throughout those 5 years and didn't really feel anything. But I think when you actually live somewhere rather than visiting, it's a little bit different. But I moved all my stuff back, and I, still did a lot of stuff with my buddies and stuff like that. And one night in particular, I remember I came home late, because back then I always hang out with my friends and, get drunk, whatever. And I always come home late. And so, yeah, this part of the story does involve a little bit of alcohol, but it wasn't because of the alcohol, if that makes sense. So I came home pretty late one night, and I walk in through the garage like we always do when, go into the house. And as I'm walking through the kitchen, there's a living room that leads into my parents' bedroom and then the stairs. So my bedroom is up the stairs. So I come into the kitchen, and as I walk through the kitchen, I see what looks like a figure, like a shadow, like if, the lights are all off, so if you see somebody in the dark, it looked like that, basically. And I just saw him walk across the window or the door frame that leads into the living room. Not even a door frame, just the frame, I guess. And so I assume it was my like mom or dad, but then I keep walking and there's nobody there, and their bedroom door was closed. So I assume I didn't hear anything. I'm like, oh, whatever. I didn't really think about it too much. I just wanted to go upstairs. So I went upstairs and I, went to bed, whatever. And then the next day, I swear to God, it was the next day. My dad comes home from work. I'm not sure what time it was. It was in the middle of the daytime. And he's just like, hey, do you think our house is haunted? And now that being said, my dad and I never really talked about ghosts before. We've talked about aliens, but not really ghosts. Like, it may have came up, here or there, and he may have believed them and stuff like that, but nothing specific, and we never really talked about things other than, like, whatever. So I was like, why do you ask? And he was like, well, last night I heard whistling. And that being said, he heard a whistle, like some guy whistling. I don't have the ability to whistle. I never have. You can ask anybody that I know. I cannot whistle. Never had the ability. Don't know how. I'm 32 years old now. Still cannot whistle. So he's like, I heard whistling. I was like, that's weird. I don't know. That's crazy. I didn't really tell him what I saw. I just was like, man, I have been having a weird feeling here lately. But no, I don't know. It's crazy. So he heard that, and then he kept hearing it. Like every few days, he would bring it up to me again, be like, man, I hear whistling. It's crazy. And then it wasn't too long after that. I'm not sure how long, maybe a couple of weeks. He came home one day. He was like, I ran into the former owner of this house, his daughter, and she told me he passed away not too long ago. Like right before I moved back. So it'd been like probably spring of 2012, he had passed away. And he's like, oh, that's pretty crazy. And he's like, yeah, so she told me that. And then I remembered I ran into him one time not too long after we moved in here when we first bought it. And he told me that he regretted selling the house because he just liked it here so much. It's in a good location. It's not too big. It's easy to maintain. It's in a good spot. It's like not far from town, but it's like out of town enough to where it's quiet and that kind of stuff. He's like, yeah. So he said he regretted selling it because he missed living here. So he was like, so between him saying that and then him passing away, and shortly after that is when the whistling started, and when I moved back and I had that feeling again, we think it might have been that guy just hanging out. And now when I go back, I don't get that feeling from that house, but that being said, I don't live there anymore either, so maybe that's why, if there is still a ghost there. So those are some brief stories that I have multiple more, but I think that's good for now, just to kind of give a background about me. And then some of my beliefs here with that too is I don't necessarily believe in haunted houses. I fully believe that spirits can move around. That being said, I don't know everything. So it's possible that some spirits are in a house and they think they're trapped there, they can't leave, or they don't know to leave, that kind of stuff. But I really don't believe in haunted houses. Which is weird because there are places like Waverly Hills in Kentucky, which is a super haunted place. I went there back in 2009. Didn't really have too many experiences at that point, but back then I wasn't really open to it either. I'm open to it now, which I can definitely tell. I've kind of blocked my guard a little bit, but not a lot. I can get into that at some point too. But yeah, so I guess to argue with myself, if the spirits can move, why would they stay in a place like Waverly Hills or reformatories or anything like that when there's so much sadness and pain there? Why would they stay there? I don't know. So another point of my podcast is to not only hear these stories and talk to people who have these experiences, but also try to figure out why these stories can happen, basically. Because I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I want to know, though. Like, I want to know why some spirits can move around and some spirits can't. Because I know for a fact some spirits can move around. And I say for a fact, you can't really prove any of this. But actually you can, too, to an extent. I do have an EMF meter sitting here, if you guys aren't familiar with that. I'm probably not the best to give scientific definitions when it comes to these kind of tools. But basically, it's just a meter that picks up specific kinds of energies. Actually, right here we go. So an EMF reader, I have the K2 EMF meter, and an EMF is basically just electromagnetic fields. They're created whenever electrical power flows through a wire, conductor, or whatever. It's a kind of energy, basically. And a lot of people, including myself, believe that these EMF readers pick up spirits when they're around. You can kind of use it as a Ouija board, but it's not a Ouija board. I don't mess with Ouija boards. But you can kind of, ask it a question, it might light up, that kind of stuff. And I've had a lot of experiences with these. There's one story in particular that I will get into another time because it's kind of long. Actually, I told this story on my other podcast, The Moose Point. I don't remember what episode it is, but it's one of the earlier ones. Just tell my ghost story. My big ghost story, which is I lived in a house in 2014 through 2015, and we had a lot of ghost stuff in that one. But those ghosts, I don't think, were part of that house, and that's the whole different story there. And that's one of the reasons I don't believe in like haunted houses per se. I believe spirits can come into a house and maybe latch on to the house or something in the house, that kind of stuff. But I have my EMF meter sitting here. I actually have it on right now. For every episode that I'm going to do, I'm going to have this on and sitting here. And actually, that's kind of ridiculous, but I do have it by its own microphone. It's turned on. So if a spirit does come by, because a lot of people believe, including myself, that just talking about ghosts can make a spirit come, even especially if you're in tune to it or if you're open, because they want to talk. They don't care who it is. If you're open to it and if you can talk to them, they're going to come, and they're going to come flooding in. And so some believe that, including myself. So because of that, I'm going to have this meter sitting here by this microphone. So as you guys listen, it's very possible you might hear something that I don't. So if you are listening, you hear a weird noise in the background, or you maybe hear somebody else talking, let me know. So I don't know if I'm actually going to listen to each episode before I upload it. I do some editing, so I probably will. But I might miss it too, I'm not really listening for background stuff. I'm listening to myself and ways to improve the actual audio of myself, not necessarily the background noise. So if you do hear something, let me know. You can hit me on Twitter. I'm easy to find. I'm Ben Axe on Twitter. My handle is Ben Lovin with a U. I know. I made this Twitter back in like 2009, and in high school I made up the name Ben Lovin. I made that name up though before the movie Superbad. I came up with Ben Lovin in 2003. Superbad came out in 2007. So screw them. I did not copy that movie with that name. But, that was how many years ago? 16 years ago since right around 16 years ago. But then once you make a Twitter, you can't really change it. So you can follow me personally at Ben Lovin with a U. You can search me as Ben Axe. I will also make a handle for this podcast. I have not done it yet, but I will, probably today actually, and I'll post it along with this episode. So yeah, I have this running, so you guys might hear something in the background. And actually, one of my goals also is to interview a ghost, which sounds ridiculous, but I fully believe it's possible, and it's not going to be something I can do right now. But it's going to happen. As like a season finale kind of thing, that is my goal, is to have a straight up interview with a live spirit. That's going to happen, so be ready for that. So I think I may have lost track of what I was trying to say initially, but yeah, so that's my goal here, is to not only tell ghost stories or interview people who have ghost stories and ghost experiences, but to also figure out what is going on in the paranormal universe, like what happens after death, that kind of stuff. I'm not all of that religious, but sometimes it's hard to deny when I hear about people talking to entities that aren't of the human background, because I feel like a lot of ghosts are humans, but other times they might not be. So what are they, and where do they come from if they're not humans? That kind of stuff. So that's my whole goal, is to figure out what is going on. And I feel like between my own personal stories, breaking down the stories from people who I interview, my wife, my sister, I already have multiple people lined up, not just people who I know in real life, but also from social media and that kind of stuff. So I feel like taking all of these stories, putting them together, and kind of breaking each down and connecting, we can kind of figure out the difference between ghosts, entities, spirits, what makes a haunted house, why certain spirits can leave, certain spirits can't leave, that kind of stuff. And then also I'm going to take this on the road and go to like haunted locations and just hang out, give background stories of those locations, post pictures, that kind of stuff. And then also interact with spirits that are in those locations. I've been to a lot already, not before I got into any of this, and especially my wife can just feel this presence, and they really talk to her. So she's going to be a big part of this show too. So yeah, I think that can go ahead and wrap up episode 1. And that's, I hope you all understand what this show is going to be about. And I really hope you keep listening. The next 2 episodes, I do have my wife on, and it gets a little emotional. I'm going to try to keep it light too. I try to joke around and say dumb stuff. That's just who I am as a person. But I want this show to be a little bit different and a little bit more, not heavy, but just more serious than what the Moose Point is, which is also a fun pack. I just like to talk, basically. And it's just a fun thing to do, good hobby. But yeah, my goal for this show is to really dig in deep into the paranormal and figure out what is going on, why it's happening. And that's it. So again, I hope you enjoyed it. You can find us on all your favorite platforms. We're going to be on maybe not SoundCloud. I don't really know yet. Maybe SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play Music, Apple Music, which is I think iTunes now. All kinds. So yeah, hope you all liked it, and let's just keep learning about the paranormal together.